And our meeting tonight is now open for sharing testimonies of healing through Christian Science. Dave from Florida, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. A couple of weeks ago, I had noticed that my knees were starting to hurt when I walked. So I asked a practitioner for help. We worked on it for a couple of weeks, and some of the things she told me to work with were as follows. Walk to the glory of God. All movement is in mind, God. Know this, God, I am taking a walk with you. Handle the belief of age. Be on the offensive with it first thing in the morning. And also study pages 244 to 248 in Science and Health. It addresses age. It's been less than 2 weeks, and now my knees are fine. I'm grateful for Christian Science, to be a member here, and for the work of the practitioner. It's good to know that praying the way Mrs. Eddy intended heals and can heal our country. God governs. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen from California, go ahead.
Good evening. I am so grateful for the blessings I have received since coming to Plainfield Church. I did not realize that although I had been raised in Christian Science, I had not received the teaching of it as Mrs. Eddy taught her students. I had had many healings over the years, but I still felt that Christian Science was about healing the body or any situation that needed to be healed. As I have been working with a practitioner here and utilizing all that this church offers in the way of instruction in correct teaching of this science, through its website and church services, I no longer start with a problem and then read and pray about it in the effort to heal it. Students of Christian Science are taught to begin with perfect God and perfect man, as Mary Baker Eddy says in Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures. Man was created by a good God, a perfect God, which makes me his idea, perfect and good, regardless of what the circumstances are saying to the contrary. This understanding has blessed me in letting go of a nervous habit I have had my whole life. It was not obvious to me that the habit was a result of nervousness or anxiety. But after coming here to Plainfield, I knew it was something that I no longer wanted to identify myself with. My practitioner gave me hymn 154 in our hymnal to work with. It reads in part, quote, "In thee, O Spirit, true and tender, I find my life as God's own child. Within thy love is safe abiding from every thought that giveth fear. In thee I have no pain or sorrow, no anxious thought, no load of care. Thou art the same, today, tomorrow. Thy love and truth are everywhere." Unquote. This hymn helped me to see that I had absolutely nothing to be worried or anxious about. I abide in his love where nothing can touch me but God good. All I have to do is turn from the situation and look to God for all my needs. I realized, too, that I was holding on to a false sense of responsibility. I needed to put my care and all those whom I love in the hands of God. To be truly obedient to him, as the Bible and Christian Science teaches, we must, quote, "Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he will direct thy paths," unquote, as it says in Proverbs. I never once set about trying to get rid of a habit. I knew there was nothing that I needed to get rid of. Just be the reflection of God that knows nothing to be anxious or fearful about. I wasn't aware that I had been tense all these years, but I became aware of it as it was fading out. As I was sitting watching television or anything that required me to just sit and listen, my whole being was calmer and quieter. This has also taught me that it does not matter how long one has been struggling with a situation. When it becomes so clear that in God's allness there can be no problem, it just disappears from our experience because it was never there to begin with. I am so grateful to be a member of this church and to be here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, either Ron or Linda from North Carolina. Go ahead.
It's Ron. Thank you. Some 40 years ago, I backed in through the back door of Christian Science, following my wife's lead, questioning everything, having been immersed in Eastern spiritual disciplines for many years. That questioning continues to this day. The answers continue to become clearer and more relevant to my life's journey. One answer to a particular question has had a profound effect upon this journey, touching many more lives than my own. It was about 25 years ago, during my work with a statewide program whose focus was upon children with special needs and their families. Among my work was to demonstrate to families how to work with their child who, up to that point, had been a complete puzzle to them. On one particular day, I could not get this young person to do any of the activities I attempted to put before him. Instead, I chased him around the small room for 1/2 hour, nervous sweat beading on my forehead, while his parents looked on through a one-way mirror, expecting to learn how to work with their son. Despite the lack of progress, I assured them I had learned a lot about their son and things would go differently at the next week's session. That next week, with great anxiety and uncertainty, I prayed to God for an answer to my question: how was there to be a blessing for this child and his family? I trusted that a solution existed, but I just couldn't quite see it. After much internal churning and several days later, an inspiration lit up my consciousness for a new way to design activities that this child could comprehend and respond to. I enthusiastically assembled 4 activities following the pattern that had come to me. I now waited for my little teacher to return. As the session began, with heightened nerves and a residue from last week's battle still making an impression, I placed the first activity in front of him. He was immediately interested, completing it quickly and successfully. He appeared happy as he finished the other 3 creations placed before him. He then proceeded to do other activities he had refused to do the week prior. This divine idea had changed everything. His family was thrilled and went away with renewed hope and ideas for connecting and working with their child. That inspiration, coupled with the encouragement and help of colleagues, family, and friends, has, over the years, turned into a worldwide business, but not in the traditional sense. My wife and I began making these activities in our garage. We understood the business to be a divine idea and, as such, have affirmed that these activities have a rightful place in the education of children with special needs. Linda and I have become the guardians of this idea, responding to its needs as it has grown. Making money has not been the driving force, yet our needs have been amply met, as well as have all who have been associated with the business. Our gratitude, coupled with that of teachers and families, is the strength that feeds and protects the idea. It's not lost on us that this business is the sole, S-O-L-E, source provider for these activities, knowing in truth they are the sole, S-O-U-L, source. Understanding this, I do not charge for educational talks given over the years. How can you charge for what is God-given? Since recently discovering Plainfield Independent, I'm so grateful for all that is offered through this generous outreach. For me, this church is such an affirmation of what's possible when we mortals get out of the way and let God do the work. Thank you.
Thank you. Dede from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm thankful for all that I've learned through Christian Science in this church, which has given me the discipline to be quiet enough to hear God's voice, the sincere desire to obey His will, and the courage and confidence to trust in Him and follow as I feel that He's leading me. I know that the desire to please Him and to do right as He sees it, always, will redirect my steps as needed and will always result in big blessings. Working this way has healed me from constant worry about the opinions of others and the fear of making wrong decisions. I'm grateful to God for Christian Science, and I'm grateful to be here tonight.
Thank you. Susan from Massachusetts, go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much for the wonderful readings this evening. A few months before finding Plainfield, I had been asked by an acquaintance to work part-time for her. Suddenly, this offer fell apart and she no longer communicated with me. I didn't know what had happened, and I felt really disturbed and took it personally. Soon after this, I found Plainfield Church and a wonderful practitioner here, who, along with the teachings here, have really helped me to understand better how to apply Christian Science in all areas of my life. Something that really woke me up was an article on the Plainfield website called Fearlessly Meet the Claim by Edward Kimball. He says in this article, if there is any resentment or hate in your heart, stay at home, pull down the blinds, don't wash your hands until you have cast it out. This made me realize the immediacy that I need to apply when wrong thoughts come to me. Also, Mary Baker Eddy writes in her book, Miscellany, on page 220, each day I pray, God bless my enemies, make them my friends, give them to know the joy and the peace of love. So whenever this lady would come to mind, I tried to apply that, and I would say, you are my dear friend. May you know the joy and the peace of love. And after a while, a peace came over me in regards to the situation, and I actually forgot about it. But out of the blue last week, after no communication for months, I received a text from this lady asking if I was available to work for her once a week. And she also mentioned she had run into someone I had previously worked for who had given a wonderful reference. I was and am so grateful to know that God's love was speaking to both of us and corrected the wrong thinking I was doing to allow me to see that good was going on. I am really grateful to be a member of this wonderful church, for the practitioner support here, for Christ Jesus, and for all that Mary Baker Eddy did to give us Christian Science. Thank you again for the service tonight.
Thank you. Craig.
I'd like to thank Day Day for those really good readings. And Mary Baker Eddy and God, that we have something too worthwhile to use this life. I happen to Christian Science. It's the greatest thing that ever happened to me. I felt like I was in a world that didn't seem to have that much hope until I found it. I took the book up while I was in college, and my intent was, how could this be true? And it was such a lovely thought about it, people being perfect. And so I started to read it, and the chapter on prayer was so important. And as I read it, it made more sense. That was why many of my prayers weren't being answered, because I wasn't listening and trying to let God's will be done, but enforcing my own. Well, a professor of mine's child was sick one time. Right around the time we had a lesson that said, Jesus, man had a sick child, came to him, and Jesus said the child was fine. And He went back home, and the child was fine. And when he asked about when the child was fine, it was exactly the time that Jesus had talked to him. Well, when my professor told me his child was sick, I was just been working on the chapter in prayer, and I said, okay, can I work for her? And I went home and I prayed, and the next day when I prayed, I got the thought, she's okay. I went to see my professor, and he was all smiles, and he says, my daughter's fine. Well, it wasn't me, it was God who did it, and all I knew was the child was the innocent, perfect idea of God. And from there, I was amazed, and I said, wow, what is this wonderful thing? We're all made in God's. We can all be and act perfectly and live right, and things can be changed. So, when you get something like that, you just protect it, and you hope to land in a place like they're here, where there are many that have found the same thing. So I thank God for this wonderful Mary Baker Eddy, who just carefully put together this book at God's guidance. And then the chapters, Genesis and Apocalypse, just tie your human steps like diligence, providence, and perseverance, or like the cattle, climbing 1,000 hills. They carry the baggage of stern resolve and keep pace with the highest purpose, which has sort of been like my life. Because when you catch on to something that's right, you know it's right because you're reading about it and seeing it demonstrated by others, and you just stick with it until you also have proof. And it's just a wonderful way this book was put together, and has been here and will continue to be here for just blessing mankind. And this church is a wonderful example of it in support of its practitioners, by its practitioners, and all the activities. Thank God.
Thank you. Someone's calling from area code 828-280. Can you please, North Carolina, can you please announce yourself and go ahead with your testimony?
Hi, this is Linda. And I thank you so much for the meeting tonight where we're all able to strengthen and share. I have a testimony that's fairly recent, and it's about our house, which is located in a busy commercial area. Over many years, we've planted hundreds of trees and shrubs to help reduce the noise of businesses and the highway, and also to surround us with the beauty of nature. Though we can hear the noise of traffic, we can't see the road from the house, only the birds and the wildlife. About a year ago, the property next door was bought by a land developing company, and for months, bulldozers and dump trucks removed dirt from the land, and there was nonstop upheaval. It was terribly disturbing as we watched a deep cavern replace what was once a wooded area. The worst part was that we didn't know how long it would go on or what the damages might be. Though it wasn't easy, I prayed scientifically not to be discouraged and to persist in seeing this new development as a blessing. Habitual behaviors before Christian Science would have had me raising Cain and using all manner of self-will to control the situation or stop it. Yet I held my thoughts in subjection to God's will to see and to love my neighbor as myself. If an opportunity for an interaction over the fence with the workmen arose, my husband or I waved or smiled, offering friendship in whatever way seemed right. We noticed that although they were aggressively altering the land, there was also a receptivity and empathy to our plight. Eventually, there was a shift from shepherd, show me how to go, to shepherd, show me what to do. And with that, little creative ideas began to unfold. First, we decided to hire a bulldozer to pull out the ancient wisteria vines that were killing the trees that separated the two properties. But with this, there now was even less of a barrier between us. with their removal. Now, not only could we hear the trucks, we could see them too. The next idea came when we identified a low area on the boundary. If it could be raised up with fill dirt, maybe the land would be high enough to put up a privacy fence. One day we saw one of the workers and asked if we could hire their company to do just that. The foreman listened to the idea and said he'd take our proposal to his boss and get back to us. The next day, an email came saying that the company would fill the land and grade it. Included in the email was a comment that they were grateful to have such good neighbors and there would be no charge for the dirt or the work. In 2 days, the work was completed and ready for a fence. They have now finished with the dirt removal project and told us they'd only be using the property to store their heavy equipment, not to develop the land. We now have a situation that is even better than it was before. We have been isolated for a long time, and it is good to have people working next door to exchange a wave and a smile with. In working through this situation, many times the words of the daily prayer came to mind. Quote, "And may thy word enrich the affections of all mankind and govern them," unquote. I'm very grateful to continue learning and to have the opportunity to share the practice of Christian Science with you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Sandy from Nebraska, go ahead.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for your readings. Always inspires. I just want to make a little comment. My heart is full of gratitude for Christian Science Independent. I know I sound maybe a little bit modest, but the blessings for many years, my friends and I, that we came to the teachings of Mary Baker Eddy, it's a hymn, a poem that she wrote, "The Father where your children are, we long to be." And now a lot of my friends, just with the divine mind is guiding you guys, because just the simple thing, indeed, we have been seekers. We have read every article in Mary Baker Eddy, but we needed instruction. And our thought didn't met the other thought, but our thought had met the independent Christian scientists in New Jersey. Now you got people, like I said before, in Costa Rica, Colombia, Venezuela, Charlotte, North Carolina, with an understanding the way that Mary Baker Eddy intended. She intended this way. And I'm so grateful for the lesson tonight and also for the invitation for Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is a special occasion. Mary Baker Eddy did it. Now people from around the world going to have the opportunity to listen to the program in Thanksgiving. I am so grateful for the tenacity and the honesty of your church to come and publicize the way that Mary Baker Eddy intended, so people can understand. It's the understanding. And now, like age, the articles on age, body, all the stuff that you offer in your website is changing people's lives, even though that we here in the United States of America, but like the previous testifier said, this is the government of God. This is the planet of God. We are citizens of the world. Mary Baker Eddy say with authority and joy, I'm so grateful for the tenacity and the honesty of all the members of the Christian Scientists Independent. Thank you so much for your readings tonight.
Thank you. Luba from Ohio, go ahead.
I'm so very grateful for recent healings I've had. About a week ago, I was experiencing symptoms of a cold. My practitioner said to read in prose works, I've got cold, and the other article, contagion. Contagion, in particular, states exactly what I need to know concerning this coronavirus. I'm so very grateful for this healing. Also during this time, I suddenly couldn't turn my head to the left without pain. Through my practitioner's work, I woke up the next morning perfectly able to move my head in any direction with gratitude. Also, several days ago, as I was raking leaves in my backyard, a hard object hit my face just an inch below my eye, which caused bleeding and pain. I immediately remembered Mrs. Eddy's statement that there are no accidents, and I repeated that. How grateful I am that this did not come any closer to my eye, and healing is occurring. I cannot be grateful enough to God and my loving and patient practitioner for her work, and to this church for all it provides. Thank you so very much for tonight's reading, and I am happy to be here.
Thank you. Ingrid from California, go ahead.
Thank you for the readings. One of the testimonies before reminded me of my experience after our 4 children left home, and I was praying to see what was my next project, my next adventure, because that's what came to me through prayer, that I just had finished the project that God has given me. And so the thing was, God, what is next? What is the next thing you want me to do? And at first that seemed like kind of unloving, but the more I prayed about it, the more I could see that I was in the right track, and that was the way to see it. And instead of the sadness and the weeping and all the worldly stuff that we hear when the kids go away, it was very wonderful to recover the joy and to understand that they needed to do some work and that I needed to do other work. And it was a wonderful blessing, because that brought me to memories from when I was a little girl and what I really wanted to do all my life. Since that time, I was probably 7 or 8, and I wanted to help what we call the poor and the people that I will see without shoes from my parents' properties. And it was just so wonderful. That led me to the nonprofit organization that we have today. And this is 10 years ago. And it is so amazing how divine love has provided for everything, every single time, every single year. Just such a wonderful thing to just pray and listen and obey what Divine Mind says and stop the worldly thinking about grief and sadness and whatever. So if this blesses someone, I will be even happier. So just sharing that. Thank you so much for this wonderful work that you do and for the amazing website and all the efforts you do for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda.
For the readings tonight and for the music. I want to express my gratitude for practitioner prayerful support and instruction. When I first started to call for help, I suffered from feelings of constant distress and was in a constant state of reacting negatively to things around me. I did not understand how to practice Christian Science, despite having been in it for all my life. I was always searching for ways to calm this sense of agitation. Under her care, at times it would feel like a faucet was turned off, and I would feel quiet. It showed me what was possible. As time went on, Through her guidance, I began to learn how to do this for myself. There were many lessons to be learned, and as I began to practice the biblical precepts day to day more consistently, putting God first, my mental state began to be free from many fears, resentment, and sadness. This regular practitioner support was chipping away at these walls of resistance so that I could begin to see how great our God is and his love for his creation. As challenges were faced, I saw the healing power of pure Christian Science. Through the prayers of my practitioner and daily living the many precepts taught in our classes, my health, activities, and feelings and interactions have all been bettered. I'm very grateful to God, Christ Jesus, to Mary Baker Eddy, this church, and to all those who made many sacrifices so that this science of the Christ is alive with us today.
Thank you. Betty from California, go ahead.
Good evening. I want to say thank you for the music and for the readings tonight. I'd like to express my gratitude for Christian Science as taught in the Plainfield Church and for God's help. One morning last week, my neighbor next door called and asked if we had a tool that could turn off the main water valve to their house, as they had a big leak in their drip system and didn't know when the water company guy was going to show up. I said I did and went over with it. The neighbor's husband wasn't able to get the valve to turn and didn't want to force it. The thought came to get my husband, and just before going into the house, I stopped and declared some truths as we are taught along the lines of God knows what to do in this situation and in every situation, so ask him, which I did, and felt myself relax and the mesmerism lifted. As I went to get my husband, the thought came to see if we could turn our valve off. So that's what we did, and it turned off relatively easily, and the neighbor was able to see what to do to turn off his valve, and it just simply involved turning it the other way. The neighbor was able to turn off his valve and also to see how to fix the leak. And all of this happened before the water guy got there. I'm very grateful for these proofs of God's care and for Christian Science and for this church. I am very glad to be here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary.
Okay, we have an email from Virginia. Please thank the dear person who wrote this week's lesson sermon. If one really listens and works with this sermon, a healing would and will come by sincere listening. Thank you with love and gratitude. And then this is a comment left on our YouTube after the after the Wednesday, November 4th meeting, last week's meeting. Jim from Arizona always has such encouraging testimonials. I look to hear from him weekly. Hi, Jim. This testimonial meeting tonight was off the charts. I am deeply encouraged by every sharing of healing tonight. We are most fortunate to find such a place to be. Thank you, Plainfield Christian Science Church Independent. And then California. Thank you, Plainfield Christian Science Church, for your leadership. Your loving, soul-filled actions promoting support of legitimate, primitive Christianity as practiced, promoted, and presented by Mary Baker Eddy. I am grateful for the Plainfield practitioners and their generous and loving support as well. Thank you, God, for my clearer understanding of the truth that God is all in all. And another from Virginia. Dear fellow members, with many thanks for the inspiration provided on a continual basis by this church through Bible studies, roundtable discussions, services, articles, readings, beautiful music with uplifting messages, and the sharing of testimonies of God's great healing power available to all. With much gratitude and love, And then Massachusetts. Opening the incoming emails on Monday morning, there was an immediate song of joy when seeing again the weekly lesson sermon, simply shining above all other received emails. Nothing else mattered. I would be so amiss in not sharing the immense gratitude. The lesson is beautiful, a beautiful flow of love, truth flowing unbroken, unstopped. And hearing Gary read the message even more clear. How could we not be grateful beyond measure for what the Plainfield Christian Science Independent brings to the global family? Joy, gratitude, light, and love, calling to all those listening for the sweet sound of eternal love and truth. And then this is, we got a couple of emails from our dear friend Napoleon in Pakistan, who translates, he and his friends translate for us in the Middle East languages. He wrote this one on November 3rd of last week, which was Election Day. He said, I am pleased to congratulate you all for the presidential election 2020 in America. It is a blessing for the people dwelling in a country to choose the authority to handle and govern the affairs of the country. So I, with my family, pray for the better future of the people, not only in America, but in the whole world. May our Heavenly Father choose His best one for us all, and the one who will lead His work for peace and prosperity throughout the world. May the people be encouraged to live their lives with happiness and independence. Amen. And then he sent this one after he had been doing translations, including the Martha Wilcox addresses. He writes, this project really brought many blessings to me and my family. I personally have enjoyed working on it. The addresses really taught me many new things, and they built a new bond of connection between Christian Science and my faith. I am strengthened through these teachings, and I can feel that strength working within me. I am greatly thankful to you to bring such a brilliant food for my soul. Thank you. And then this is a testimony from someone new from Ontario, Canada. One of my favorite questions to ask church members used to be, what brought you into this church? It always seemed so amazing that God would call me, of all people, especially since I had resisted God's call so vehemently initially. I had asked this question of a fellow member in our church just a few days before I left for a trip to Thailand. She and I sometimes stood and gave this testimony together on a Wednesday evening. Audrey would talk first and tell how her family had moved to India when she was a very young woman. Driving on the road to their new home, they had heard on the radio how a panther was killing sheep in the area. She took a break from unpacking to go outside one evening and was gazing in awe at the moonlit Indian countryside, which she had found breathtakingly beautiful. But she felt a shiver go down her back and turned slowly to see a panther stalking her. She was a new student of Christian Science and had just started reading the Bible and Science and Health written by Mary Baker Eddy. The only thing that she could remember from it to help her was from page 378, which reads, quote, by looking a tiger fearlessly in the eye, Sir Charles Napier sent it cowering back into the jungle. An animal may infuriate another by looking it in the eye, and both will fight for nothing. A man's gaze, fastened fearlessly on a ferocious beast, often causes the beast to retreat in terror. End quote. So she decided that she would look at the tiger, the panther, fearlessly, and it retreated. Then I would tell my portion of the testimony. It was most fortunate that Audrey told me the story, as I would need its lesson while vacationing in Thailand a few days later. One lovely day, I decided to head by myself towards the jungle with my camera. I had always wanted to see a jungle. I headed along the flat plain and could see the jungle start all of a sudden to rise tall above the grassland. As I followed the winding path, I could see a herd of long-haired cows ahead. They looked to me like the long-haired cattle on the Scottish Highlands I had once seen, and being of Scottish extract, I was especially enamored by them. So I hurried to catch up to them, taking pictures as I went along. But the cattle kept moving faster, so I moved faster to catch up. And then they moved off to the side, away from me. I realized only then that the bull had herded his cows off to the side, away from me, to protect them, so that he could turn around and deal with me. The bull lowered his head, snorted, and pawed the ground, ready to charge. At first I was quite frightened, because it brought back vivid memories of being a child on our farm before I had become a Christian Scientist. We used to cut through the pasture where the bull was in order to take the shortcut to school. He would race at us, and we had to slide through the barbed wire fence before he reached us. This was no timid bull, and the later story was that this bull and the neighbor's prize bull had fought each other to death, causing my father and the neighbor to no longer speak to each other. I looked around to see if there was any shelter. There was no place to hide in a flatland where everything is visible for miles, and there was only one tiny, flimsy, makeshift paper hut that the fishermen used overnight when they came down from the mountain. I knew that they were poor, and I didn't want to hurt their hut. I realized that it wouldn't afford me any protection anyway, as it looked like a breath of wind would knock it down. So I sensed this was a serious situation, but Audrey's story came to mind, and with it other passages from Science and Health in the Bible, like Proverbs. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous run into it and are safe. I am with thee always. Perfect love casts out fear. That's it, I reasoned. I will love. Silently in my mind, I spoke to the bull as I stood motionless and looked him in the eye with love. I spoke, I love you and your herd. You are beautiful. You truly are one of God's wondrous creatures. We were made to bless each other. You are doing a good job protecting your herd, and I would never knowingly hurt you. I am so very sorry that I frightened you and yours. The bull stopped his snorting and pawing and turned around slowly and went back to his cows and went his way. I turned around and went home, rejoicing and praising God. I felt that my asking Audrey that question just before I traveled was a godsend, as I later heard that those cattle were very dangerous. I am so glad that despite my early resistance, God kept reaching out to me, and I'm very glad for what I'm recently learning from being introduced to the Plainfield Christian Independent Church website. It has helped to kick me up into a higher gear of spiritual study and prayer. Respectfully and gratefully submitted. I'm so grateful tonight for the wonderful testimonies we hear from around our country and world, all these wonderful healing proofs of Christian Science, and for those beautiful readings, Dede on Mind. Some of you might not know that Dede has a full-time job and 3 very young children, and she has faithfully served our church in this manner in reading, and we are also very grateful to her and for all of you who so faithfully serve this church. Tonight I would just like to say, years ago now, when 9/11 occurred, Mrs. Evans, who had been our teacher and practitioner, she would often get messages out to us. And the day after 9/11, and of course being in New Jersey, we were quite close to what was happening, she gave this message that I will never forget. It was on page 30 of No and Yes by Mary Baker Eddy. And it is this, that God's law reaches and destroys evil by virtue of the allness of God. And I had worked with that statement many, many times. And it gave me a great and deeper understanding of how God's law does work, because it reaches and destroys. It goes everywhere to reach and destroy error of every kind. And we must never forget the omnipotence, omniscience, and omnipresence of God and his power. And that when we pray, our prayers go forth. We're not limited to just where we are or a certain locality. Our prayers go everywhere. In praying and doing watches, I've often thought of people in hospitals, prison cells, our dear soldiers, military. Today is Veterans Day, and we always are so grateful for their service. We let our prayers go out to all of mankind, and especially suffering mankind. And I would just like to read to you from Spiritual Footsteps by Carpenter, who says, Truth, man never sends out a demonstrating thought that does not reach its object and accomplish that whereunto it is sent. At the time of the 8 o'clock watch, Mrs. Eddy went out on the upper side porch. I always gained the impression that this hour was consecrated to working for the whole world, and that she never permitted anything less to come under the searchlight of her scientific consciousness during this time. These universal outpourings nearly always lifted and sweetened her thought. Students of Christian Science must take their cue from their leader and build up confidence in the power they reflect, establishing the glorious fact that their spiritual consciousness has the very powers of the universe back of it, that nothing can stand before it, that it has greater speed than that of light, that it goes wherever it is directed